name is Joanna, the accent is Bulgarian, if some of you do wonder, and the topic is revolutionizing the cultural experience. The other day we heard John Nichols tell us how the festival goers experience can be revolutionized through using new technologies and radio frequency identification. Today we'll see how wearable computers can change the gallery or museum goers experience and how this will change the relationship between art and its audiences. I would like to begin with a graph. This is Gartner's Hype Cycle, and this is a graphic representation of how new technologies develop and mature over time. So if we have a potential technology breakthrough when no actual products still exist, but media interest is picked up, then on to a lot of hype, a lot of publicity and popularization, immediately followed by a certain sense of disillusionment as technology fails to deliver against expectations. And if products are not touched at this point, basically it would lead to a slope of enlightenment or a crystallized understanding of how the technology can be used by a variety of clients, eventually leading on to mainstream adoption. Last year, 2/3 of this room witnessed Emily Root's presentation on augmented reality and its applications on managerial practice. And I believe most of us by that point are familiar with augmented reality's applications, so I would like to chart these along this graph. We have the widely used 1D barcode, 2D barcodes with most famous representative the QR code, marker-based augmented reality, and markerless augmented reality, which is, I guess, what Emma showed us through her augmented reality cinema app. And this leads us to the beginning of the graph, the newest of developments, and this happens to be what I'll be talking about today, the point where wearable computers need augmented reality. I have chosen to look at a new technology as kind of an issue in itself, just because I believe as managers we should be able to discern hype surrounding the newest tech toy from actual implications on the user experience and how we as managers shape and nurture this experience. I would highly encourage you to go and check out Google's video on their augmented reality glasses, which will give you a good idea of how a wearable computer attached to glasses can enhance our visual perception and really change our interaction with the world. So I'll definitely do this later. It has this wow effect. A few definitions so you all know where I'm coming from. By augmented reality, I mean the technology which offers a real-time image of one's surroundings, then enhanced by a layer of computer-generated information. A wearable computer is simply a computer worn by the user, controlled by him, which is always on and accessible. The exchange relationship is the exchange of something of value between two parties, and in our case, this is between art and audiences. And finally, I will look at managerial practices, art and audiences within the scope of museums and galleries, just because that's where some technological innovation is happening, or is to happen. In order to arrive at the implications, I have basically combined and critically evaluated concepts taken from journals and scientific papers, often written within the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. A lot of groundbreaking research happening there. Then I have framed this within art marketing theory. And finally, I will give you an example of one such technology. And to gain insight into it and to discuss its implications, I had an inspiring discussion with its project manager, Roger McKinley. So I have chosen to look at one technology in particular, just so you can get familiarized with how it works, what the prototypes are, and what are the possible uses. But there is one more reason why I have chosen ARtSENSE in particular. Some of you might be surprised to find out that its development is partly happening right under our noses, or more precisely here. This is where the foundation for art and creative technology is, and FACT is one of several international collaborators on the project. So I think by its proximity it just adds an extra layer of importance to me discussing this issue today with you. What is ARtSENSE? First, it's an acronym, and get ready. It stands for Augmented Reality Supported and Adaptive Personalized Experience based on processing real-time sensory events. This is the first and last time I'm referring to it by its full name. And I will go through this one more time. Basically, it's technology with an augmented reality feature, which adapts to the museum visitor in order to create a personalized experience. And it does so by reading and interpreting the user's sensory events or feelings and emotions. ARtSENSE basically aims to enable a novel cultural experience by developing computer assistants which can look over the user's shoulder, the real world, and then by reacting to changes in his interests, the user world, they will adapt the digital guide function accordingly by displaying relevant content. The different prototypes currently consist of augmented reality glasses which can display video, audio and text, complemented by headphones which can play the audio bit to the video or just audio in itself. A microphone which can potentially take in like voice commands and do audio monitoring. And currently in development are biosensors which can be used to determine the user's emotions and changes of interest through collecting physiological data on galvanic skin response and blood volume pressure. That's basically some of the technology behind lie detectors, for instance. So what is the actual output or possible use of such a technology within an exhibition experience? The visitor can utilize the technology to automatically recognize an artwork, and in response to this, to respond through imposing a layer of content onto the real-time image or onto reality. The type and format of content can be varied. This information can be as little or as much as relevant to the user's needs, and depending on his changing levels of interest. Within the overall exhibition journey, this will then create a coherent story or audiovisual narrative. The technology can act as a guide to form an exhibition path from room to room or from a painting to another painting, making sure the visitor doesn't miss out on anything that might interest him. And finally, with the biosensor's help, it could potentially collect data on the visitor's changing emotions, behaviors and responses in front of different artworks or in different places, and also record the user's path throughout the exhibition. So, in order for me to find out what the implications of such technology would be on managerial practice in particular, I have chosen to frame this within the field of marketing. Why marketing? Because this is the one field which looks at facilitating relationships between art and audiences. And this is what the technology and the presentation aims to look at, this relationship between art and audiences and how it can change. So I will move from the general to the specific, looking at the implications on how we address audiences, to how then we shape the visitor product over experience, how this impacts on the individual visitor, and finally, how the overall exchange relationship has changed. So beginning with audiences, wearable computers can revolutionize basically how we form our knowledge of audiences, how we see and how we address them. This is the area of marketing research basically. Up until now, we have collected data on demographics and on opinions of what people think about their experience. But here, there is a real chance of collecting data on physiological responses and on users' actual emotions and behaviors, as well as how they move through space where they spend more time, for instance. And this essentially will give answers to the questions why and how, not just the who, what, when. These data, however, can be quite sensitive and will certainly raise some ethical issues. For instance, how to gain permission to collect such type of data, let alone use it and God forbid share it with other people. And this is simply so because we're not speaking of mere facts here on one's age or ethnicity, but about visitor behaviors and emotions that they themselves might not be aware of. Moving on to how then technology can change how marketers perceive and enhance the art experience. Now I will pay a little bit of a tribute to Mr. Phil Sachs and his marketing classes and take an in-depth look at one of the 4 Ps, the most important one, product. And I argue that wearable computers can change using the beloved model by Hill and her crew, which outlines different levels of an experience. I argue that wearable computers can change the first 3 levels of the art experience. And let's see how. The core benefit of an art experience or this service is for an art visitor is basically experiencing an aesthetic or emotional effect from this visit. This experience, the artistic experience, can be seen as the communication process, an indirect communication process at that, between the artist and the viewer through the art object. However, without the help of any additional information or storytelling aids such as wall labels, catalogues, and so on and so forth, this communication process can be easily interrupted. Shannon and Weaver help us visualize this through their communication model, which sees communication as traveling from source to destination through a channel, and I have adapted this to the art experience by having the artist as our source, the viewer as the destination, and the art object as the channel. For people unfamiliar with the arts or with an artist or a movement, the message which is being transmitted might be unclear, to say the least, and there might be a disturbance along this channel of communication, which Shannon and Weaver call noise. Noise can be any internal or external barriers to the visitor, hindering them from picking up the message and understanding what the message is. For instance, I couldn't blame a person who doesn't know much about Andy Warhol or pop art or the 70s, or why they wouldn't appreciate the importance of a soup can hanging on the wall. Storytelling aids, of course, address this problem by providing some context and some information. However, their relevance to the individual's knowledge and needs can be highly relevant. Wearable computers, on the other hand, will select on behalf of the user or help him select the right amount or type of content which will help them understand the message or make a meaning on their own. Therefore, core benefit will be magnified and value extracted much more easily. Moving on to the second level of an experience, the central experience. This basically encompasses the tangible and physical aspects of the experience or the physical environment. As the wearable computers are a physical element in themselves, which are to be worn as a prerequisite to experiencing art in this scenario, their design and comfort will be crucial, and it can really add or take away from this level. If the user's comfort is at stake, the experience can really be sabotaged, and will galleries take the risks to have this experience sabotaged if the first generation of products, for instance, is clunky? There tends to be a trend in the visual arts that they will pick up on new technologies much more slowly than the entertainment industry, so products might not be very good looking or user adaptable at first, and that might be a problem. Of course, we want happy visitors, just like this person who is very happy to be wearing their augmented reality glasses. However, will this be the case? The third level, the extended experience, is all about providing ancillary products or additional activities in order to magnify the overall experience. And wearable computers will change this level by making aspects of some of these redundant. For instance, information from publications or within educational programming will be displayed in a much more user-friendly manner. And as good as publications in themselves and educational programming can be, they only reach a few of the overall number of visitors who pass by objects unaccompanied by any kind of additional information. However, instead of just making some aspects of these redundant, technology can also be used to magnify the importance of ancillary products or merchandising. This point kind of came across from me being a bit imaginative of how the technology can be used and having a discussion with ARtSENSE project manager. So we thought that the technology can basically make recommendations at the end of the journey on what the visitor could purchase from the shop, relating to what artists or what paintings he got excited about. For instance, our hypothetical visitor might have gotten excited about Van Gogh and looking at paintings of umbrellas, although don't take this example. So the wearable, the technology can basically be used as a strong tool to achieve more satisfactory merchandising results, if such a thing does happen indeed. Now that we've looked at the product, I would like to show you how the technology could impact on the visitor directly. And I argue that this would be through enhanced personalization, education and participation. Personalization and the provision of a customized narrative or an audiovisual story is arguably one of the technology's strongest points. Daniel Rice, in the book Art and Its Publics, informs us that in their relentless pursuit for audiences, museums have found that telling a good story helps. As simple as that. And if the story is adaptable and really tailors to one's interests and is with the right timing, it would make the user feel really, really central and looked after. So, just as an example, if a person is looking at a dead shark and at a Damien Hirst exhibition, and they really, for some reason, don't like dead sharks in tanks, they might get a recommendation to go see some pretty dots instead. However, there is a problem with this personalization and focus on the individual. What if our hypothetical visitor decides to take a friend to the exhibition, which is not an unlikely scenario at all, God forbid we're with his family even. Would managers risk to sacrifice the group experience, the social experience, for the individual's experience? Of course, developers are trying to address this issue. However, it is a fact that technologies like ARtSENSE, at the beginning, will only tailor to the individual. So we have to really ask ourselves within the gallery, can we consider the individual as more important than the group? Secondly, this will impact on the visitor through enhancing his learning experience. An urban historian, Christine Boyer, frames this by saying that the wearable transforms the experience of the visit into a multimedia augmented memory palace, in which the memory of the visit and the learning experience are greatly enhanced. This is basically the case because researchers claim wearable computers help enhance a constructivist style of learning. Constructivism is a theory which maintains that people can only understand what they themselves have constructed through interaction with their environment and its features and characteristics. So the technology will help the user make meaning much more easily. And the implication of this is huge because within the bigger picture, it's not just the tools for experiencing art that are about to change, but about the very way in which people make meaning within the gallery and how they learn and memorize within their visit. Finally, speaking of interaction with the environment, this leads me on to my third point, that the visitor role could essentially change from that of a mere observer to an active participant. And participation, coupled with the previous aspects, will allow for much greater psychological accessibility to the arts, breaking down the barriers to long-term visitor engagement that have been there for centuries. And essentially, it would give us a chance to make the arts accessible, not just geographically and economically, for instance by granting free entry to museums and galleries, but psychologically and socially as well. How then will the exchange relationship between art and its audiences change? The visitor will give in their time, money and attention, and with the wearable computers or assistants' help, in return they will receive a very personalised journey with an audiovisual story, an enhanced learning experience, and enhanced entertainment through interaction with the device and through being in a reactive environment. How could this be used within other art forms? Well, I did not mention that ARtSENSE currently wants to encourage organizations to think more about their physical space and their archives in order to use them to create a bit of a story or a journey throughout these spaces. And I think this very well relates to what Emma showed us in terms of using cinema content to create a user journey, to discover that content. And in here we have the opportunity to use technology which really makes us immersed into the whole experience, and we don't need a phone or a screen to look at. And this really applies equally to museums as much as it does to theatres and live venues, or any place with any history or anything from the past to show. As for performances, I think it would take some time to see how this can be adapted to performance where we don't have communication between an art object and a person, but we have live performers. I think managers should think more about how can they personalize the visit of the visitor, and if there is any additional content or context which, if provided, will enhance this experience. There is already an attempt at creating interactive theatre, so you can check this out if interested. And finally, I would like to conclude by saying that whilst technologies like ARtSENSE might be a thing of the future, and by the time they are with us, they might be nothing like what I've just talked about. However, what is important for us to remember is the changing trends in how we collect data, perceive and see our audiences, how we then shape a unique user perspective, and most importantly, the trend towards personalization and making sure that we cater to the wants, needs and levels of knowledge of each individual visitor. Thank you.
Questions? Yes.
Am I right in thinking that museums are free now? And if they are, is this not going to be quite a costly thing to implement, and how would it be afforded?
Debs is asking, given that museums are free, can they afford this seemingly quite costly technology?
I think that's the great thing, that it's currently museums and places like FAC which are developing such technology, and not just the entertainment industry, so that they can then make it affordable to other museums and galleries. And this is where the factor of collaboration comes in place. I mean, we all hear all the time how essential collaboration is, and in this case it will be as well. So if they all gather forces, they gather their strengths together, they will make it affordable for themselves.
You know, you talk about all the positives of using wearable technologies in museums. I was wondering if you think that in some way it might kind of manipulate what people experience in a way, you know, individual experience and how you see things and walk around and get your own thoughts and experiences, that the technologies can kind of make you look at specific things.
Ida is wondering whether it will affect your experience and maybe manipulate what you see and how you see when you walk around a gallery or museum.
There is a real danger of this, indeed, and the technology does create a disconnection from the environment, and it might feel like you're a bit of a slave to it. However, I think that's where galleries have to get it right and appreciate the personalization factor, and basically adapt the technology so that it can make really the right suggestions, so the visitor feels like the central one, like the suggestions are right for him, and that he wouldn't feel threatened by being manipulated to see certain kind of things, but more like being guided and being given the right recommendations as not to miss out on what he might like.
What about Jack?
Intended or saying that they enjoy the TV films and TV television, but they don't enjoy having to wear the glasses. Do you think that not only having to wear the glasses, but a microphone, a headset, and something that measures your heart rate and other things like that, do you think people would accept someone to do that?
So would people accept having to wear, if people complain about 3D glasses, would they complain about having to wear so much stuff to have their heartbeat read, to have a microphone, etc., etc.? Would that become unacceptable?
Well, now the prototypes I was showing was really pictures found by me, because if you have to see pictures of the actual prototypes, they would look awful on the screen, as people look like cyborgs, and it's not pretty. However, that's what I was trying to address by looking at the central experience and how adaptability of this technology to each individual user and its comfort can be indeed crucial to how well it's taken by galleries and how well it is received by visitors. So it is an issue for developers and galleries alike.
Last question, Joe.
I was going to say, I presume it's only like the big main galleries that can afford technology at the moment, or will be able to. And then, if you've got children, I'm sure they want to go there and use the technology. But could that push like the smaller galleries where no one wants to go to them at all because they're more like maybe even more boring in children's eyes?
Joe's question is related to the first one, really. If this technology is expensive and only the big galleries can afford to adopt it, does that push out the smaller local galleries, which are much more boring, particularly from a children's perspective?
Yeah, that's one of the issues I looked at, and I was thinking as well, oh great, again, Tate Liverpool will have it all, and the great museums will have it all, but how about the smaller art places within the city? That's again where collaboration and partnerships can help, by bigger museums lending the technology to the smaller places. And I kind of asked myself the question, would affordability of this technology change as quickly as customer expectations? So if customers kind of get used to only using such technology in order to have a really great art experience, what would this mean for places which don't have it basically? But this might be a far future scenario.
Great, thank you very much.